Hello, everyone. Welcome to Getting In, a college coach conversation. I'm Kyra Tyler, a senior director here at Bright Horizons in the College Coach Division. I've been with the organization since August of 2005, which is wild. So, a little over 20 years. I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you this week. Friends, we've got a really big show today that I'm very excited about. I'm excited about all of this because I love doing the pod, but today is special. We're going to be continuing our Becoming series with the CEO of my company, Bright Horizons. His name is Stephen Kramer. We will bring him in 1 second. After we connect with Stephen, he's going to stick around and he's going to be joined by another one of our phenomenal colleagues who's our VP of Educational Consulting, Stacey Raddick. And for everybody, I think this is a pod you're going to want to really listen the whole way through, maybe even at regular speed. So without further ado, I'm really honored to welcome our first guest, the CEO of Bright Horizons, Stephen Kramer.
Hey,
How are
Kira, it's
you?
great to see you.
Thanks, you too. Thank you so much for coming. This is a huge honor. I'm really excited you're here. I'm really thrilled that we could transition the Becoming series into becoming a CEO. I think it's a really fun way to get at what is oftentimes like a mysterious role, right? With a lot of people have a lot of expectations, but they don't really know what goes on. And so I'm excited to get through a couple of things so we can help our friends better understand what it takes to become a CEO and what happens when you get there. So, to kick us off, we're focusing on the origin story of our guests at the very beginning, and so with that in mind, Stephen, I would love you to tell me about your early self. Who is early Stephen? Where did you grow up? And what kind of student were you before college?
Oh my goodness. Wow. We're going to really go back in the archives.
There, yes.
So happy to do that with you. So I grew up in Framingham, Massachusetts, which is best known as the place that had the first outdoor mall in the United States. And I used to
Cool.
frequent that mall as a kid. And so I grew up there. I lived in the same house for my entire childhood. And then, look, I was always focused on business. So I can tell you as much about what I wasn't as I was. So I was never the high school athlete. I was never the individual that was maniacally focused on my studies. But I
Okay.
always had a penchant for working. And so, as an example, one of my early memories is that I became not the high school yearbook editor, but
Okay.
I was the business editor, which really meant that I had the responsibility to go out and build a team and ultimately go out and sell ads. And wouldn't you know it, I figured out that I was pretty good at that and pretty good at building a team to do that. And so ultimately, we had the first color yearbook in the high school's history because we raised so much more money than we ever had done in the past. And so it used to be a black and white yearbook, and we were able to raise enough money to ultimately have a color yearbook. And so when
That's
I thought
awesome.
about going on to college, it was really with that in mind. I
Mhm.
was very early an entrepreneur and very early someone who cared a lot about sort of driving new and different. And so I applied to four schools. So back in the
Okay.
day, it was really different from today when the students are applying at 20 plus schools. I applied to four. Um,
Right.
and my list consisted of the school that my father went to because he wanted me to apply there, the
Okay.
school that my sister went to because I was familiar with it and always felt good about the experiences that she had had. And
Sure.
then two in the middle that I actually selected. One was Babson College and one was Emory, both of which had strong business programs. And so, wouldn't you know it, I was waitlisted at Tufts and got accepted into Emory, got accepted into Babson, and then got accepted into Skidmore. And so I was really choosing between the two programs that had strong business.
Yeah.
And what made the decision for me was my mother cried the entire flight home from Atlanta and could not believe that I was considering being a plane ride away. And so I ended up 12 minutes from my house at Babson and had a residential experience, but nonetheless, still had the ability to be close to home.
Yeah. Stephen, there's a lot I really appreciate about what you said. One, you admitted you're a mall rat. You were a mall rat. Two, I think it's so you that you were the business editor. Um, and but also like as you were saying that, I was thinking, oh my goodness, so many of our families and our students can relate to like, okay, what would I say on the Common App activities section about first color yearbook? You surpassed your metrics on money raised, you were entrepreneurial. Like, I think that's really great. And I can certainly relate to the going to school closer to home than you anticipated because I mean, I wasn't 12 minutes away, but I was 40 minutes away. And I thought I was also going to be a plane right away, but that wasn't meant to be. Talk to me a little bit about Babson. Like, so you step on campus. Did you know anybody there? Being so close to it, did you know anyone that was going?
I didn't. I didn't know anyone going.
Yeah,
In fact, what's funny about it is that, of course, my father, went undergraduate. He started at MIT, then moved to Tufts, and then went to Tufts Dental. And so, in his mind, a education trajectory and a professional trajectory were sort of really intertwined.
yeah,
And so you can imagine his disappointment that I was going to in his mind, vocational college, right? Where ultimately the only thing that you would learn was business.
mhm,
And from his perspective, you go to school to broaden your mind and ultimately get into a pre-profession. And so he thought I was going to go into the family business of dentistry, and that wasn't going to happen out of Babson. But I didn't know anyone going. But interestingly, during orientation,
mhm.
I signed up for the intramural tennis tournament.
Okay.
And as luck would have it, I met who would become my best friend and then future business partner. And so it was very early days that I found someone that I really had quite strong kinship with.
Yeah,
And that really made those beginning days and weeks so much easier in terms of the transition to college. When
sure.
I met someone who, we became fast friends and ultimately became, long-term friends. And so that made the transition to college for me much easier.
Yeah,
Um, and so we played in that intramural tennis tournament. And that was the beginning of a budding friendship.
yeah. Um, Were there other? I also met my best friend like day. I didn't know her. She's from Baltimore. I'm from Chicago, everyone. And I met her. She was also in my flute studio, and there were only four of us. And so, we sort of, when you're in a spot like that, you sort of sniff everybody out because you're trying to figure out who's gonna be first chair, who's gonna be, like where's everybody gonna land? But we also became really fast friends. Like day nine, I think we were like, well, we're best friends, obviously. I mean, I talked to her this morning. And so I love that you went in open without any history and you found someone to connect with. And I can't wait to pull that string a little bit later about that story between the two of you and where your friendship landed has taken us, I will say collectively. But what I'm curious about, and I hope you'll share, is talk to me about getting involved besides intramural tennis and at Babson. Were you in any clubs? How did you spend your time outside of the classroom?
Yeah. So, look, I was from the Boston area. And
Yeah.
so, for many of my friends, I was sort of the host of the city, right? So, I spent a lot of time socially and really, introducing many friends who are not from the Boston area to
Mhm.
Boston. And so, social was a really big component of my life at Babson. I would say the second is that a lot of the clubs and activities that I was involved in actually revolved around business. And
Yeah.
so at Babson, that's a shared passion across the board. And entrepreneurship in particular is a shared passion among many of the students. And so you found yourself manifesting not only in your academics, but also
Hmm.
in your extracurriculars, the thing
Hmm.
that you all had in common and that you loved. And
Yeah,
so I would say my experience at Babson was sort of twofold. On the one hand, it was very heavily steeped in business, both academically and co-curricularly. And
sure.
then the second part of it was a more traditional, really social experience from that perspective. And then I would say that the piece that was in between is that within the Babson context, I started a number of businesses, right? And so at that time, while I was there, that was the first time that Babson got recognized as the number one business school for entrepreneurship. And
Cool.
so I just remember Michael and I seizing that opportunity, and we produced t-shirts and we sold them out, in fact, because
You
people were
sold them
so
out.
proud. Yeah, so people were so proud that this small school in Wellesley, Massachusetts got recognized in such a significant way. But I think about the different businesses and the different business plans that I, did with others, and ultimately, had a great time doing. That was sort of that perfect intersection between social and the business aspects that really scratched that itch.
Yeah. Um, and I know how strongly and fondly you feel about Babson, and I love that we're getting to talk about it. Everybody, this is not a commercial for Babson, but I love that we're able to like dig a little bit deeper into your time there. I think it's really interesting, and I have sent a number of students there. I feel really they have a really powerful program and experience for people. Did you, and I don't know, Stephen, if this, having worked at Brandeis, I'm certainly familiar with Babson. Were you able to take advantage of classes at any other Boston area campuses? I know obviously you weren't going to be a dentist, but any other schools that dabbled in? Did you take a class at Wellesley?
You know what? It's so funny. I did not take any classes off campus with
Okay.
the exception of one.
Oh,
I needed a science requirement.
okay.
And someone on the inside said, if you go to Mass Bay Community College, the science requirement that you're probably not that good at, you may find more appropriate for what are interested in. And I
Sure.
have to tell you that the reality was that it was really hard, that it was really rigorous. The
Yeah.
students that were there were quite serious.
Yeah.
And so this, escapade off campus that I thought was going to be, this sort of walk in the park turned out to be quite the opposite. And
Yeah.
that was the only experience I had of courses off campus,
Yeah.
with the exception of I went abroad. And so I did study at the London School of Economics, very on brand, again,
Yes.
really focused around economics and business.
Yeah.
Got a semester in London, which is where I fell in love with theater and where I fell in love with London. And so I credit my study abroad at LSE with two things that I carry forward with me for my life, which is a love of theater and a love of the city of London.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So, all right, you're making your way. You're a student at Babson. It seems like you're taking full advantage of your time there. Your time comes to an end. You graduate. What, walk me through like the first 5 years after you graduated. What did you do?
So what was funny about the lead up to graduation, and maybe this is a Babson thing, maybe it's broader than that.
Yeah,
One of the fun things at Babson was, you would apply for a lot of jobs, right? That's what you would do. Like you were
sure.
all there to ultimately get a job if you weren't going to start your own business. And so, again, this will sort of give you a quirk into my personality. One of the things that I enjoyed was I got many, many rejection letters for jobs. And so I used to post the rejection letters on the outside of my dorm door for all to see. Um, but the job that I got ultimately was the job that I had hoped for, which was in management consulting. And my goal, and I had, a very special professor who became a mentor to me,
Hmm.
who said, look, your skills, your, approach would really benefit from what he described as sort of a survey course in business coming
Okay.
out of college, which is
Mm.
consulting.
Yeah.
And so I was able to get a job at Arthur D. Little, and was a consultant for 3 years there. I got to travel, which again, I credit my love of travel to the time I spent in London. I
Yeah.
got to travel all over the country and, in fact, all over the world. I got to work on incredibly complex challenges and problems. I got to be in rooms I didn't deserve to be in at the age and stage that I was at. And
Yeah.
I learned a tremendous amount. And then ultimately, the thing to do coming out of consulting is you go back to business school, which is what I did. So I applied to 3 graduate business programs. I ultimately chose one and spent the next 2 years doing, in some ways, a lot of similar work to what I had done in undergrad, but doing it at a different level with totally different experienced students and professors. And that became the springboard to ultimately, the next chapter of my life.
Yeah. Um, I want to point out to folks that I think you said something really interesting was, and you said it in jest, right? I mean, I obviously know you. I know your sense of humor, but you said like being in rooms that you didn't really deserve to be in, like you had no business being there, but that you really took that as an opportunity to sort of be in the moment and learn. And I think we have our young folk are so impressive and so ambitious. And also, I still think that um, I really appreciate when people will say, even to me, like, do you mind if I actually just kind of come in this meeting? I'm curious about what you guys are talking about. I haven't had exposure to that. And if it's not appropriate, I don't mind. Or can I grab, 30 minutes on your calendar? I'd love to ask a little bit more about this. And the idea of being a purposeful observer, I think is something that I just wanted to highlight from your story because I think it's so important, it's so powerful, and it's still really relevant and important today. I hope people will hear that from you. Um, we share an alma mater. People can look at your bio. If you don't want to say where you went to business school, we can skip right through that. But if you wanted to say where you went to business school, you could also say that. Um, I will leave it there. But so you go to business school, you come out of business school, and then what happens? Because I think I enter your story not that long after.
That is correct. So, look, I think that one of the things that was really eye-opening about my experience in business school, and I will share that I went to Harvard Business School, which I don't generally admit in most rooms, right? Because I think that people sometimes have connotations and or feel like that is something that is better unsaid. I certainly do. But nonetheless, if you get sort of past the humility of it, or at least the humility that I bring to it, what I would say is that the number of doors that HBS opens is nothing short of remarkable.
Yeah.
And so as I think about what the next step in my journey was, it was quite remarkable to think about the different options and opportunities that you have coming out of there. And I think the other thing that is sort of a fun anecdote is that as much as my father felt like I, had selected the path of trade, which, by the way, we all know is a great thing. But for someone who
Yes.
comes from the medical profession, they think that that is the path. There was something about HBS that legitimized the path that I was on in my father's eyes also.
Hmm.
All of a sudden it was, boy, you know what? Maybe you were onto something in terms of, your talent and where your interest really laid. And so that was another interesting turning point in life is the validation that it provides, not only in the broader world, but in the case of me, even within your own family. So the summer between my 2 years, I took a position, again, dream job for me in
Hmm.
venture capital, which was the other side of a survey course in business,
Yeah.
right? So instead of partnering with large companies and understanding the inner workings, and as I said, being in rooms I didn't belong, now I was sitting sort of across the table from entrepreneurs who were out there starting something from nothing, really thinking big and were looking for both financing as well as strategic support.
Hmm.
And I really loved it. I spent the summer doing it. I had an incredible mentor at Fidelity Ventures, who, again, like my mentor at Arthur D. Little, is still a friend to this day. And so, in terms of pulling on threads, mentorship is so important,
Huge. Yep.
and has been an enormous source of strength for me in my career.
Hmm.
So, met an incredible guy, worked on an incredible team, and ultimately decided to join there after graduation.
Okay.
And after a year of seeing and feeling the contagious energy around entrepreneurship, I said, I really have to be on the other side of the table. I can no longer be the intake for all of this enthusiasm and energy for entrepreneurship.
I get that.
And, through that whole time, had always talked with my best friend from undergrad, Michael London, about the idea of starting something together, because what's more fun than starting a business with your best friend, even though
Agreed.
everyone tells you that is not something to do. We started researching the concept of providing college advisory services to teens transitioning to college. And we did a bunch of market research while we were still in our current jobs. We really investigated it. We started talking to potential investors and ultimately decided to leave my role at Fidelity. And again,
Mhm.
it was one of those points of inflection, Kira, where people thought that I had literally lost my mind, right? I had this really stable, really
Me too.
amazing job, right? Where people were seeking out venture capital jobs as if it was the job,
Yes.
and I was departing. And so, long story short, we got College Coach started, and we had a great time with it. I mean, it was not easy every day,
Right.
but it was a lot of fun every day. And so, out of my two-bedroom, two-bath apartment in Brookline, we started what is today College Coach.
Amazing. Um, yeah, and everybody, don't be afraid if you have a good friendship, it will sustain. I mean, right? Like you can be honest, you can have trust, and what better that than to do it with someone that you have a good relationship with. What was it about? Because at this point, you are far out from your undergraduate time. You are far out from applying to college. And so, what tickled your brain about this college admission process?
Um, so I had a very close relationship with my guidance counselor,
Yeah,
uh, Miss Walker, and she was really helpful to me in the process of selecting and applying to college. But the reality was that she was one person responsible for hundreds and hundreds of students in my very large public high school.
sure.
And so I had that experience and I had a huge amount of time for her and ultimately what she did, but also recognized that not everyone got the same time and attention, because it just wasn't possible. It just so happened we had a nice relationship. And so we were able to work in that way. And then Michael, on the other hand, had worked with a private counselor. I never even knew private counselors existed in the free world. So the reality was when we had talked about how we both had gotten to Babson over many years,
Yeah,
it was just really interesting to see how we took two completely different paths to get to the same place. And so, as we talked about different ideas, and both of us were always passionate about education, we were always passionate about business. Each of us had done some work at Babson in and around the admissions office. And so it's not quite as far afield as it might feel today as we look back, but we sort of felt more closely aligned. Didn't think we were experts by any stretch. So one of the early, inventions was going out and actually hiring experts. On the other hand, we thought we could bring something to it, and that was the formation of College Coach.
yeah. And so, for everyone listening, I joined the company. It was a few years into its founding. Um, Stephen did hire me. And
One of my
we
best genius was to hire you.
thank you. Where everybody thought I was also crazy. Like, what do you
Yes.
mean you're gonna take your Bachelor of Flute Performance and your master's degree in education. Stephen and I share an alma mater for grad school. I also went to Harvard for grad school. Like, what do you mean you're going to take that? And I had been, finishing up a fellowship at the Harvard College Fund, and I was thinking of going back into admissions, but I was a little bit of a risk taker, and I was like, I don't know, this seems really interesting, And I had worked for a consulting firm right out of college, and it was very entrepreneurial. We had gone public while I was there. I really, and so I felt an energy here, still doing what I was excited about in the admissions community, but in a totally different way. And I was like, I mean, I'm all in. Like, what do I have to lose? And it turned out I had nothing to lose. I mean, it's been I feel like I've had a career I'm proud of, I think is how I will put it. And so I was hired in 2005 and getting my feet wet and, really like, I mean, I got thrown deep into the bottom end of the pool, but really realized very early on that I loved it. And then a year in, I get a letter in the mail, like September 1st of 2006, that says, we have been acquired by Bright Horizons. And I was like, what? And so I would love to spend 2 minutes talking a little bit about that. Like, how was that process for you? And
Yeah.
Michael, because you guys were still, working together, co-founders. What was that like?
Look, I think that we always knew that we wanted to get College Coach to a level where we had proven that our idea really worked. It had the ability to scale. We had the ability to have tremendous impact on the lives of others,
Mhm.
but also recognize what our limitations were,
Yeah,
right? And increasingly, what we were finding was the hardest part of what we were doing was actually garnering new clients. And
sure.
so during the earliest years at College Coach, we really found great traction in offering college advisory services as an employee benefit. So there were, small sort of cottage mom and pop kinds of consulting firms that were doing it at retail.
Yep.
And we always said, we want to have greater impact. We want to remove the financial barriers associated with getting this great advice. And so we tended much more towards the employer side and the benefit side. But ultimately, that was really hard yards. And so, we started with our first client. They were AIG. They introduced us to the New York Stock Exchange. They
Yeah,
introduced us to Goldman Sachs.
sure.
And we had good momentum,
Hmm.
but we weren't able to get the lift necessarily that we thought we might be able to if we partnered with an organization like Bright Horizons that had at the time hundreds of the clients that we were looking to garner.
Sure.
And so we had conversations. Bright Horizons seemed impressed with the work that we had done. And ultimately, we made the decision that it would be best for the organization to take its next step in cooperation and under the umbrella of Bright Horizons.
Yeah.
I would say that even more um, sort of difficult than coming to the decision to come together with Bright Horizons were the early days of being at Bright Horizons, right? So we were the first
Yeah.
foray outside of childcare for
Yeah.
Bright Horizons. And so there were a lot of growing pains on both sides
Hmm.
in terms of how to adapt to what we did, and likewise us adapting to a place where it was much larger, more scaled, and ultimately had more process than we were used to. But I'll tell you, it has turned out to be the best marriage. And not all acquisitions go that way, right? So
Right.
I'm really
Right.
clear that one of the concerns that we had up front is how many acquisitions don't go well. This
Hmm.
one happened to go really well. But it took probably 5+ years for us to finally find the right rhythm between the two organizations. And part of that, candidly, was having Michael and I get out of the way. And so after a couple of years, Michael departed from Bright Horizons. I moved on to run Bright Horizons business outside the US. And so we had incredible leaders, you included, who emerged and were able to do it in ways that really capitalized on all the great things of Bright Horizons and at the same time stay true to who College Coach really is and was.
Yeah, and I do feel that. I mean, if you had asked me when I was sitting in your office when you were interviewing me in 2005, would I still be here 20, almost 21 years later? I'd be like, what? I mean, I couldn't, there's no way I could have even fathomed that. But I think what I want people to understand is that sometimes it's really worth sticking with it and seeing what's on the other side. I mean, we're going to be welcoming Stacey in to continue this conversation in a couple of minutes. But, I always sort of say to her every year during my review, like, yeah, I think I'm good for another year, and I think there was a little bit of that. Like, how does it feel? Do I feel like I'm still learning? Do I feel like I'm still growing? And as an employee, it certainly felt like, is this a fit? I don't know, but it wasn't not a fit, right? I just wanted to see what was kind of on the other side, and I think what's on the other side has been really interesting. So you were here college coach, you go abroad, you're still with the organization, and now here you are as a CEO. Talk a little bit about that before we take a little break and Stacey joins. When did that happen?
Yeah. So we joined, and it really was a we. We joined in 2006, as you said, September of 2006. And I became CEO in January of 2018. What I would say is that first, I never aspired to be CEO of Bright Horizons. In fact, in the earliest days of joining Bright Horizons, I never aspired to stay at Bright Horizons, right? And so,
Yeah,
when you think about aspiration, I think it's really to your point and exactly what you just said. I was just a really curious person. I really was intrigued with the work that Bright Horizons did. I really love the culture that existed here.
yeah,
And while it was a really different framework from size and scale and process, it felt like something that was at least worth giving a shot. And who else was going to move me to London, newly married, for a multi-year experience doing work that I was completely unfamiliar with? And
right.
so, to your point, taking a chance and seeing where it goes can make a huge difference. And likewise, when Michael departed, he took a big chance, right? He
Yes,
was well
absolutely.
respected here and ultimately made the decision to go somewhere else and ultimately created, great career for himself. And
Yeah,
so I think that's been really interesting. And if I reflect back, so I think that's one piece. I think the second is, um, I think at the same time that I didn't aspire to be CEO, I really did aspire to continue to learn and grow. And so, with the support of, again, incredible mentors, the then CEO and the then president, Dave Lissy and Marianne Tosio,
yep,
were tremendous mentors and sponsors. I know you have and had a great relationship with Marianne.
yep,
She's someone, as is Dave, that really was invested in cultivating the careers of others. And so I was a huge beneficiary of that.
yeah,
And then ultimately, when Dave made the decision that he was going to retire, he had pressure tested me in a number of different roles across the company. He had very thoughtfully put me in different situations with different people, and ultimately had the confidence that I could do that role.